Welcome to the Permanent Podcast, real talk about owning, operating, buying, and selling small businesses. The reality is that businesses are made up of people, and people are messy. So, how do you navigate such a messy and complicated landscape? Well, let's talk about it on the Permanent Podcast. We're back on the Permanent Podcast, another episode of Outside Insights, people from outside permanent equity, giving their insights in and around the SMB space. We are going to air a conversation we had with John Fiorentino. John actually came to town, and we sat in this little garage studio that we're in right now, and we got to talk to him. And I tell you what, it was a memorable conversation. John's a memorable guy. I'm excited about this conversation airing.
I am too. I mean, it was just so much fun.
It was really fun.
I mean, it was just a blast. Like, I wasn't quite sure. I mean, it was new. I mean, we're fairly new to doing interview-based podcasts. And
well, he was actually, just to put it all out there, he was our first one.
He was our first one.
We were kind of figuring it out. Still are figuring it out, but very much at that time.
Very much so.
And it was a ton of fun.
He makes things so much fun. I feel like John is such a unique human.
Agreed. He
is this weird amalgamation of like a modern-day Walt Disney crossed with like, I don't know. He's like this big kid.
He's a big
enthusiasm.
Kid.
And maybe Walt Disney maybe had the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, never met him.
But he just Missouri boy. You know.
I do.
Yeah, Missouri boy. So
I don't know if you guys know this or not, and we will definitely not say it again in the podcast. But Walt Disney was a Missouri boy.
Walt Disney was from Missouri, and so are we. So obviously, success by association.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So John has this idea of world building that I feel like, in some circles, maybe is blasé or like, oh, that's past. Like, when I say world building, I'm talking about truly creating a Lord of the Rings-esque, a Star Wars-esque, a Pokemon-esque reimagination of the whole universe that you get to live in through different mediums.
I like that, and that sounds a little bit untouchable to me. And what I appreciate about John is he helps you approach world building even in the smaller things. Just as someone who's even creating things like a podcast, or people listening who are creating products, building things, from the marketing to the stitching to the factory line to everything, you are building a world, and you're trying to help people enter into it. And it's easier to enter into it, the better the world is constructed. And that's, to me, what's inspiring for kind of a universal listener. We all are making something in some way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's building a world too, not just to make money, but to actually change people's lives for the better. I mean, Moon Pals, which we'll talk about, is the first world he's really built. And there's been other products he's built, but it feels like the first like kind of holistic world. And the whole idea of Moon Pals is to comfort children that are scared. And I mean, he sees this product and the products that have come out of it. There's a plush kind of stuffy. You bought one for your children. Maybe you can actually tell. And you actually said your boys, like, it made a material difference.
Yeah. So my 9-year-old, we got him one, and he's someone who's kind of prone to maybe a bit more anxiety than the other sons. And so I thought of him when I heard about the Moon Pal. And that weight, I mean, the science behind it, we maybe talk about later, but the weight of it helps calm him, helps him just slow down a little bit.
And the story behind it too is meaningful, right?
It comes with the book, yeah.
I mean, it comes with the book, and the whole thing is like they're trying to save humanity through hugs, right? Which sounds kind of dumb, like when we talk about it like that, but it's actually like a very sweet story. Anyway, I'm thrilled because we're going to take that brain that's building worlds for 100+ years, trying to create these dynamic worlds, and try to help him apply it to small business owners and operators, which I'd say we did a
sometimes
B minus C plus job. But I hope that people who are listening to this take their time and slow down and listen, because like John is packed with insights and thoughtful things that I think will help people prosper.
Let me just give you a couple teasers as we get started. He went from being Justin Bieber's intern to sleeping on a subway homeless to having $2 million in his pocket.
Yeah, probably a lot more now.
And he almost gets beat up by a famous rapper.
Yes.
Let's dive in.
Thanks again for doing this. I mean, we've had this idea. I mean, everyone's got a podcast now, I feel like. And I feel like it's one of those things where I didn't want to create like another interview-based podcast that was just like, so tell me about your story.
Yeah.
Tell me, who
are you?
I was
born in Boston.
Right, exactly.
So this is actually like a part of one of my little ideas about the world. I think I think the demand for a good podcast is like 1,000x. I think that the creation of them is completely overwhelming, but the appetite for it is like incredibly high. So if you catch a thing, if you catch the real thing, it will just fucking go.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it's just like, just find a new thing. Like if you can position this around something that people actually want.
Yep.
And it's new and it's different, it will explode.
Yeah. I want to start with a story that I couldn't believe when I first heard it about you. In fact, I heard about you before I met you, and I was like, man, I gotta meet this guy, right?
Okay.
So you're a musician, and you're basically homeless.
Yeah.
How do you go from a homeless musician to literally last month, I saw your TV commercial on national TV, and I was like, oh my gosh, honey. Like my wife's in the kitchen. I'm like, oh my gosh. I know that guy.
The beanbag
guy. And she literally turns to me and she's like, the beanbag guy? And I was like, yeah, I know him. And she's like, cool. And then she kind of like went back to chopping carrots or something like that.
I got a free coffee the other day because she recognized me as the beanbag guy. So it pays off.
I mean,
I'll take the ego hit as being the beanbag guy as long as I can get those.
I mean, you go pretty hard for being the beanbag guy. Okay. All right. So take us back. So you're a musician. Tell us about being a musician. Tell us about.
Right, I'll do the quick hit. I was always okay. Oh, God. Okay. I'm falling right into it. Well, in second grade.
I heard a Nirvana song.
Yeah. I always had this weird thing where I would kind of exist on polar opposites. So like, captain of the lacrosse team, bro, jock guy, while studying jazz conservatory every weekend. And like, basically having my pick to go to college for lacrosse or on a jazz scholarship, which is like funny. And I've always sort of been like dragged between both of those personalities in me. So the quick story was I chose jazz. I went to school on a jazz performance scholarship and, was sort of the jazz drummer guy at NYU. And then sort of got pulled into my other half of me where I was like in New York. I was like, holy shit, like I want to go build something really big. This is like amazing. And so I kind of dropped out and I had my mindset on either working for Kanye or Bieber. And I went out every single night basically searching for those teams. I met both of them, had funny interactions with both of them, ended up at Scooter's. Scooter, met him on the street, ran into him. I was like, yo, give me a job. We talked for like a half hour.
Scooter's Bieber's manager, just for
yes.
listening.
And so I dropped out of school for a quick second and went to go be Bieber's intern and kind of had this like really hysterical 6 months of, kind of like playing entourage driver. I was basically Turtle for like 6 months.
Give us top three Bieber intern moments.
Top three: beating him in beer pong, driving Usher around and listening to him sing his own song in my passenger seat. I was like, yeah. I was like, oh wait, no, this is sick. And then I really fucked up once. I almost got fired. I almost got fired like 12 times. Like Scooter pulled me aside, was like, yeah, like you're the worst employee ever, but like you can kind of hang out for a little bit. But I was in charge of throwing the parties on Sundays at Scooter's. And, he'd always invite all these people over. They're like, it was like the big Sunday party and it was like nice. And I was the cook. And one time I had to go get kosher sausages for everyone. And I cooked chicken sausages and I gave one to Ludacris. And he was like, yeah, this is like, this is kosher, right? I was like, yeah. I didn't even I was like 19. I didn't really know what that even fucking meant. I was like, okay, sure. And he takes a bite into it and he looks at me. He goes, yo, give me the fucking packaging. And I was like, what? And he digs through the gut, pulls it out. It was chicken sausage, but wrapped in pork. And I almost died. I was like, okay, that's it. Like, I was like, I'll leave. I'll get a plane tomorrow. That's it. But yeah, those were like that was a top three. It was hysterical. It was like every day was an absolute, like I could go on forever about these stories. It was like the most funniest shit of all time. And then, yeah, I left. I was like, me and Scooter had a very long, serious talk one day. And he was like, this is, he nicely basically fired me. He was like, this is not for you. You're never going to work for anyone ever. Go and do your own thing. So I left and started to do my own thing back in New York. And I started a bunch of shit and none of it worked. Started a women's fashion company, started a tech thing, started like a t-shirt thing, started all these things. None of it was working. And yeah, basically was sleeping on couches for like a year and a half. I made a fake website. Quick story is I made a fake website. I sent it to my friends of friends and said, this is a new thing. It's kind of like an exclusive Airbnb for dope dudes. Like,
Are you the dope dude?
Yeah. I was the dope dude. I was like, hey, you sign up. Someone really cool is going to come stay on your couch. No, fuck you guys for laughing.
Bieber's intern. Bieber's former intern.
In 2 days, I got 500 signups. And for, a year and a half, I basically picked off friends of friends from that list. I went to go stay on their couch and I basically would show up, be like, yo, what's up? I'm the dope dude. And if I can stay on your couch for more than a month, at the end of all this, when somehow I make something work, we're all going to go on the sickest vacation ever. And that was how I lived for like 2 years.
Have you taken people on the vacation yet?
We fucking ripped in Cancun.
That's awesome.
And it happened really quick because like it was like a year, literally, because it was like I was like sleeping on couches and shit. And then boom, Kickstarter happened. I dropped Gravity Blanket and it I literally went from like Subway stuff to like waking up with a couple $1 million in my bank account because Gravity went viral. For some people it was like a year, but for some people it was like 4 months of me. Like from 4 months ago, I was on your couch and now I called them up. I'm like, yo, pack your bags. I just got the Scarface house in Cancun. We're going. It was like,
hey, it's the dope dude. We're going.
It was so cool. No one knew each other. It was 17 dudes. No one knew each other. And literally within 10 minutes of everyone getting there, we were best friends. Like it was like the funnest 4 days of my life.
So Gravity Blanket was the invention that kind of put you into orbit.
Yeah, that was the one.
Okay, so you're living on people's couches, functionally homeless.
Yeah.
You just got fired as Bieber's intern.
Yeah, game over.
I want people to understand that it sounds like, hey, I just tried a whole bunch of stuff and stuff didn't work and then something worked and then, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that's an oversimplification of
a fun story.
Of what reality really is, which is, I wouldn't call you a marketing guy, even though you know how to do marketing, I think with the best of them. And I would never necessarily even call you a product guy, even though I think you know how to do product with the best of them now. I would tell you, I think you're one of the best in the world that I've ever seen at this idea of storytelling and world building. And so to the small, medium-sized business owners and operators that are listening to this, they may be like, what does world building have to do with, what does storytelling have to do with my HVAC company in Des Moines, right? But I think by the end of this, I want them to realize how absolutely integral this could be to their business and to their life. And I think it all starts with, you're on people's couches. You just got fired from being an intern because you fed Ludacris a non-kosher sausage. I mean, that's a heck of a launch pad, right? You created this product that really captured people's imaginations. I mean, my wife bought one of these before I even knew who you were. And I mean, we've had one of these for years now. So take us through the idea of what world were you building there? What was the story that you told yourself? And then like, how did you actually go from having nothing, I assume you didn't have a bunch of money to invest in marketing and product and all this stuff, to then having this really kind of sensation happen.
Yeah. It's great. It's like, I think I looked it up the other day. It's like weighted products now are like $1 billion category.
And you basically invented it.
Yeah. I mean, so this is a nice little Ben Franklin quote. Tell me the difference between discovery and invention. It was not like I straight up invented it. It was that they were being used for a very specific use case for kids with autism and people with PTSD as a prescriptive through basically like therapeutics.
And they're ugly.
Yeah,
they probably don't feel good.
When I say like where I got the idea was I was having a meeting with a sleep scientist and she said the one-liner of, well, if you sleep with 10% of your body weight, that is an incredible natural anxiety relief and it helps you go to sleep. And I was like, whoa. Like, I've never heard that before. What? And I like ran home and searched on the internet and there was nothing. Like absolutely nothing. There was like 2 people on Etsy doing them for kids. So they were like tiny 10-pound ones that like weren't really, they like had dinos on them and whatever. There was nothing out there that was like designed for regular common man type of use case of they just want to relax and feel better and sleep better. And nothing was really in that design. And so, yeah, I was like, I kind of took a thing that kind of existed and then, spun it 20% and positioned it a little bit differently. And that was the thing that exploded. And so, yeah, my little thing is don't ever let anyone tell you that an idea is worthless, because a literal sentence was the difference between this thing sitting, under the leaves for eternity and then a 1-sentence tweak. We do $5 million on Kickstarter in 30 days. And it was just like this crazy transformative thing in my mind where it was like, oh, wow, that's how the world can work.
But I think if we press pause there, because you may not be giving yourself enough credit, like you had your eyes open and you had your ears open to ideas that you were hearing around the world, right? You were totally paying attention
totally
to what people were telling you. And I think a lot of people would say, oh, that's cool. 10% of your body weight. That's an interesting fact. Like whatever. And then like moved on with their day, right?
Yeah.
Did you test it? Did you go and try 10% of your body weight?
Oh yeah, I went home, ordered all the materials, built myself one that was like 10, 15 pounds and put it directly on my chest, and I passed out in like 5 minutes and woke up and was like, holy shit, this is gonna fucking work. I was like, this is amazing.
I heard a rumor, you tell me if this is legend lore of John Fio, that you slept on a subway and you had stuff on top of you, and that's when you had the idea.
So I've heard lots of legend. I heard the other day that I was touring NASA and they told me this secret. I was like, this is amazing. That legend is actually true. I spent a few nights on the subway in a pinch where the Bermuda list, couch surfing list didn't come through. And yeah, the joke to the person that I was meeting who was a sleep scientist was, she was like, wow, you look pretty tired. What happened? I was like, I'll be honest, like I spent the night on a basically a bench last night. And then my joke was, but it wasn't that bad because I was really comfortable snuggling with my bag on top of me. I was like, it was very calming. And she was like, oh yeah, well, that's a real thing. 10% of your body weight relieves your anxiety. And I was like, okay. So yeah, it's like very weird how this shit works. Like that's sort of the leap of faith of like, and you talk about how I'm not giving myself enough credit of having this fun little tone of like, this was an accident that sort of just like I stumbled into after playing beer pong with Bieber. Yeah, that is like totally not what happened. It was like test after test after failure after failure after like completely carving away at my idea of a thing and how that thing that I create in my head meets true reality. And if you're 20% outside of understanding how to make that thing that you're making resonate with the market, it's not going to work, and it will never work. You can throw a bunch of money at it and it might look like it's working, but if it is not really resonating with a true objective truth, it will not last. And that is a brutal, like talk about walking through the flames. Those are flame walks, like insane, excruciating nights and, rabbit holes in your head where you're just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, and you're just carving away at this thing. And, it probably took me, I think I tested 70 sentences and went through probably about, 200 of them to get the sentence of gravity blanket of a 25-pound blanket for sleep, stress, and anxiety. Like that took me fucking 3 months. And it's hard. It's really, 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 really hard to find something like that. But the nice thing is when you put the work in and you really stay committed to crafting and creating and finding that thing that is true, when you put it into the market and you give it to the world, you are rewarded. And that shit just moves. And it moves really, really quick. And you don't really need to do that much in the beginning if the idea is good enough. And yeah, that was sort of the case with Gravity.
I mean, it really comes down to telling stories. I mean, that's what you did with the Gravity Blanket. You told a story about why people needed this thing they didn't know they needed.
Yeah. So I'll push back on you a little bit. I hate the word storytelling. I actually want to go to everyone in LinkedIn that has recently changed their bios to storyteller and say, no, sorry, try again. That is one of those words that doesn't mean anything. Like a lot of these words, like brand and love and like all of these words that a lot of people make a lot of decisions about. When you really start to ask them what that is, you realize that there is like 150 ways to describe that word. And so storytelling is a word that doesn't really mean anything. So I would say I actually don't really think about product marketing as storytelling. I think about product marketing as actually a part of the design process of the product. So that sentence actually crafts the literal design and the experience of the product, and they are all intermingled and they are all interconnected. And if you change one of those words, now you have to change a seam on the product. That's kind of how I think about it. It is like this, like, you know, hexagonal vortex with a cause and effect on everything. And I sort of play around with that until you kind of get it perfectly. Like here's a really good example outside of the Gravity Blanket one is my personalized astrology gift company, Birth Date Candles. I think astrology is really cool. I think it's real. And I think it's about to be way bigger than it is right now. So like coming up with a product, I was like, okay, a candle. Okay, what's the sentence? Okay, astrology candles, you know, or is it signs? Do we have 12 candles? Is that, you know, subscription or all this stuff? And then you start thinking about what is the moment that you're going to tell someone at dinner that they have to check out and buy. And then that starts to craft this idea and this experience. And then that actually starts to affect the design of the product. So that's, and you know, literally I sat on that idea for like a year, this idea of like, how do I productize astrology? And just, again, crank, carve, talk about it, test it, think about it, go look at things. And about a year into it, I had the moment where I was like, oh my God, 365 candles, you buy the one for your birthday. That is a completely different product with a completely different promise that is messaged completely differently, that sits in the consumer's head in an entirely different spot than astrology candles. It's no longer an astrology business. Now it is a birth date business. And what's the difference? Am I going to think immediately to buy someone a Leo candle for their birthday? No. But am I going to immediately think about buying someone a birthday candle for their birthday? Yes. So now the customer changes, the design changes, the product changes, and the promise changes, and how you talk about it changes. So when I think about storytelling, so I disagreed with you for a second to just be kind of an asshole, but you're kind of right. But I think storytelling can probably be better defined by you have these levers as a part of the organism that you're building, and every sentence that you communicate about that affects every other sentence. And if you're not aware of how those sentences ebb and flow and play off of each other and affect literally every piece of your business, then you're missing something. And if you understand how those levers work and you understand the mechanics within that sort of, you know, thing that you're building, which are sentences that play off of each other, you know, now you're sort of understanding, in essence, what it kind of is like to build a world. You take one thing away, something else comes in. You take another thing away, another thing comes in. And then through that process, you're going to have a very clear understanding of what the most important sentence is and how to say that directly to the right customer in the right place at the right time.
So maybe we can talk about it. Take this down from, if I'm a widget manufacturer in Denver, and we're thinking about extending our product line, how do you think they're probably thinking about it? Like, what have you seen that they're probably doing it? And then what would be the way if like you went and bought that business, or you were hired to come in as like the chief product officer of that firm? What would that change?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, and I don't want to put words in a dude who owns a factory's mouth. because I've never owned a factory, but I have walked factory floors and I've changed things and I've seen how it affects it. And I think the one mistake that I see when I work with factories and they're trying to help me come up with products is that they're trying to avoid the scariest, most confusing part, which is the customer. And it comes from laziness and fear, essentially, because they don't really want to talk to the customer, and then what the customer might tell them might end up changing the materials that they get and how their manufacturing line is set up and who they need to hire and all this stuff. And so they're just like, whatever. I don't care about that. And the way that I would go into a factory and change things up is say that there is probably literally nothing more valuable than understanding what we are making and for who and why. And then my bet is that when you figure out who you're making it for and why you're making it for them, that will actually probably lead to legitimate insights about how to set up your manufacturing process and what you should quadruple down on and what you should cut. Right? So like I would start with the customer and I would start with making sure that the thing that we are manufacturing is entirely perfectly amazing for the customer, because that's going to have, 100x impact on how my manufacturing process runs.
Is that how, so when you thought about the gravity blanket,
Yep.
is that how you thought about it doing
Yes.
it? Was going out and did you do that process yourself of going out and talking to customers and throwing a blanket on them?
I have videos of it. I have endless videos of me putting a 25-pound blanket on strangers. I walked around Washington Square Park and made a ad about me walking up and looking like a complete psychopath, approaching strangers saying, "Can I put my 25-pound blanket on you?" And they're like, "What?" And that video ended up being probably one of the most viral marketing campaigns that I did. But when I was doing it, it's fucking terrifying, because this is a thing that I made that has never really existed before in the world. And I'm walking up and seeing customers' reactions live. And it's literally like, having someone just look you in your face and be like, "You are an ugly person," if they don't like it, right? It's like, calling your baby ugly is like super real. And when I talk to a little tangent, someone, I weirdly get hit up. I really don't want to do this shit, but I weirdly get hit up by like weird TV producers about like ideas and shit. And one of them pitched me on this idea about doing basically The Apprentice on the street for like influencers, which is fire. But the thing that I kept on telling, I was like, okay, I really like where you're going with this, because we could do shit like this. And we talked about it and we tested it a little bit out in person. And a lot of the shit that I did, they were like, "Just walk me through how you go about doing this." And I would be like, yeah, I'd have this idea. And then I was like, I would make it. And then I'd literally walk around the fucking street and try to sell it to people. And then we had this test shoot where we had this like, influencer come and sit with me, and she had this idea for this like, whatever. And I was like, great, now go out in the park and try to sell 10 of them. If you don't sell 10 of them, you lose.
You're fired.
You're fired. And she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. She could not go. She could not approach people. When she did, she didn't know how to talk about the product. She didn't know what to talk about first. And I think that like, again, like a lot of this just comes back to like insane fear of like, you don't really want to know that your idea sucks, because it's way easier to focus on what color should we do and what's the logo and, oh my God, investors, and do the investors like it? Ooh, I'm validated. Okay, who's going to come work for me? Oh, I got that person. Well, guess what? What are you guys all doing? Oh, you haven't talked to 100 people? You haven't sold air to 100 people? How are you going to sell 10 million of these things? If you can't fake the sale of 100 to random strangers on the street, you don't have a business.
The conversation continues in just a moment. We took a short break, and so we're taking a short break here too. The way that John articulates wanting to work on things that are real reminds me of a lot of the things that I hear Tim Hansen say. Tim Hansen is the CIO of Permanent Equity. He's one of the people who I've learned the most from when it comes to investing, how to make risk your friend, measuring success. and just kind of general first principles thinking when it comes to money decisions, both personally and professionally. He has a daily newsletter called Unqualified Opinions. If you're someone who is all the way from a professional investor all the way down to someone like me who had to be told that Unqualified Opinions wasn't just self-deprecation, but it also doubles as a tax audit joke, well, then I'd love to commend this newsletter to you. It's a daily newsletter. You can head to permanentequity.com and go to resources and look for newsletters Unqualified Opinions. Okay, so let's dive back into the conversation with John Fiorentino. As we jump back into the room and the conversation with John, just to give you a little context of what's happening, I had just noticed that John had finished his Red Bull, and so I was offering him something to drink, which then triggered Brent to offer some snarky comments about Red Bull, and then that launched a whole discussion about the merits of Red Bull, which then somehow devolved into whether or not Uber is a real company, which for a minute I was like, what the hell are we talking about? And then it kind of made sense. And then why John is trying to build something real in the world, one hug at a time.
Yeah, actually.
You don't want that lighter fluid? You want more of that? We can go out and get you some more.
You're so wrong about this. B12, dude. 80% is B12.
It's not 80% B12. I guarantee you it's not 80%.
No, you're right. It's B6 is 250%.
So they made up a number and then put 250% of the made up number on there.
This is the best product, but one of the best products of all time. Talk about have a good thing. It just fucking goes. This.
You're done. You're not incorrect.
Sugar-free Red Bull is good. It's It's like totally not bad for you. All I'll say anecdotally is that if I rip like 3 espresso shots, I am fucked up. My stomach is like over. I could rip like 6 Red Bulls and I'm dialed in. Less caffeine, a little bit of vitamin stuff. I mean, it was the guy got it from Thailand. From like old Thailand medicine stuff.
Oh, is that true?
Oh yeah. You don't know the Red Bull story?
Oh.
I mean, you go over to Thailand, you find a little secret like that, you bring it to the US.
You're a multi-billionaire.
Now you're Red Bull.
Now you're sponsoring race cars.
Now you're sponsoring it's probably the second best canned drink ever made. Coca-Cola obviously being number 1, obviously. But the Red Bull thing is so unbelievably impressive. Talk about companies that were ahead of their time. They were like 20, 30 years ahead of their time. Talk about, what I like, we're going to get into what I'm like thinking about and kind of doing or what I'm going to do. That content and commerce flywheel that they made was perfect.
Yeah.
And like, again, like literally like 10, 15 years ahead of everything. They had a Red Bull media channel. They took that perfect product and they made that an empty vessel for some of the best mixed media marketing of all time.
I mean, I feel for a while like everything sports related was sponsored by Red Bull.
Yeah.
And they did original content with it too. It wasn't like they just were like slap a logo on, do whatever. I mean, they did like performance training. They had a little performance institute at one time. I mean, I don't know if they're still doing that. Maybe still be doing that. But like, didn't they build, am I making this up? They built, what's his name? Something White. Snowboarder dude. Shaun White. Sorry. The tomato.
Yes.
He's the big tomato or something, or the spicy tomato, or the, I don't know, whatever the tomato is.
Just a redhead.
He's the redhead, right?
I should warn you, he loves ginger jokes.
Oh, I do.
Every podcast.
I do love ginger
Every
jokes.
podcast.
I do love ginger jokes. Well,
tough.
Anyway, Red Bull built him his own half pipe, right?
Yeah.
Didn't they?
But okay, so then I also, the sort of meme is like, oh my God, they tricked the consumer. They didn't, though. That is the thing, is that they had not only the best marketing, the way that they positioned the brand and the promise of the brand and the things that they positioned it around, all of that shit would have never worked if I don't have a Red Bull in my hand right now. The product is unbelievable. So like you can do all of this magicianry, and this is kind of a thing that I have a deep belief on that I think a lot of people don't. Most, especially in D2C world or like product consumer world, the majority of the people thinks that everyone's an idiot and that you can trick everyone. And the thing that, I really, really try to hold myself to is knowing that that is not true, is that I am not capable of being smarter than anyone else to trick massive swaths of people to give me their money for a long period of time. I have to make a really, really incredible product. Cons and these tricks can work. they can only work on a very short timeline, and you have to get the timing perfect. And to me, that is like most of the venture world. Like it really, the way things are funded, the way things are financed, the incentives, what you're expected to do, the story that you're telling that you have to deliver to investors, like you're really playing the lottery. And at the end of most of those games, when you look at what's behind the curtain, it's not real. And I think this is sort of the like distorted reality we've been living in for the last like 15 years that's sort of getting snapped back, and everyone's like, whoa, what the fuck is happening? Like that company's over, that company's over, that company's over. And it's like, well, what happened there? And it's like, well, a very small number of people believed this incredibly dangerous, toxic lie that they are capable of lying to an audience and being smarter than them and getting away with it. And when that is your goal, which is, I guess that's, a portion of capitalism, and, there's a meme, everything's a scam, so just do a scam. I guess that is like a way that you could spend your life. It's certainly not how I want to spend mine. And what's way more interesting is if you sort of submit to this larger idea of, actually, I am not better than anyone. Actually, I am not smarter than anyone. And I am very, very identical to, almost everyone on the planet. And I know that I am incredibly hard to impress. And I know that I don't give my attention to anything unless it's amazing. And so if that's true for me, and I know that I'm not better than anyone, then I have to make something absolutely fucking amazing for myself. And if I can get myself to think and want that can of Red Bull, if I made that formula and I'm able to do that for myself, then I can honestly take that to market, and I can honestly sell that, and I can honestly confidently know that someone is going to give me their money for that product forever because it is the truth.
But can I press in a little bit on that? Because I don't disagree with anything you said. I love the ethos. I'm a guy who buys small Main Street businesses, tries to help them grow, and holds them forever, right? So like my world is the exact opposite of the burn it up, go public world of the VCs. But I do think, I guess I've been living in it now for 15 years, but my career really started kind of 15 years ago. And so for the 15 years that I've been in the business world, that model's seemingly worked. And I mean, you say it's kind of snapping back. I don't disagree, but it feels like I used to think that it was all kind of like smoke and mirrors, but it feels like there's enough real things that have come out of that model.
Like what?
I mean, is Uber a real company at this point? I mean, let's just take that. That was the poster child of sort of like fake it till you make it, shock it into existence.
I don't know. Like, never made money.
Is that the test though? I think that's the question, is ultimately, is it long-term? I mean, I would say under my model, like how I value companies is present value, future cash flows, right? I mean, ultimately that's what's got to be at the base of business. Doesn't work without it, right? But I guess depends on how you look at equity. I mean, Tesla being a good example of this. I mean, we're hopping around into our examples, but like, I mean, they've never made money. They've consumed a tremendous amount of money. The CapEx has been incredible and has produced the wealthiest man in the history of the world, arguably.
Yeah, so I am down for this existing on a spectrum. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trying to look out for the entrepreneur. Let me warn you, entrepreneur people, the fool at the venture-backed table is the entrepreneur. So like, you might be right that like a few of these companies have worked. I don't put Uber in the same camp as Tesla, because the story and the promise that Tesla is very transparently delivering to their audience and their shareholder is kind of infinite and kind of endless. And I actually think that is one of the biggest insights that Elon had, was like, wait, I'm going to pick a line in the sky that literally never fucking ends. So there is actually no way to measure the success of Tesla, which like paradoxically is going to make it maybe one of the most valuable companies of all time. Uber, I'm like, I guess. I mean, what's the story there? Who's the team? If Travis was still there and then he tacked on the food thing, would that be something that I would sign up and bet for? Maybe, probably not. Like, I don't know if I really would. But again, like, I think that there's a very important distinction here where we kind of have to snap back to a collective, objective agreement of how we're going to value things going forward. And I think it's like super, super dangerous when everyone is operating under this like shrug of like, well, if you can sell it and there's a buyer and you can pull it over on them for a little amount of time and, get your bags, then, that's what they call capitalism. It's like, I just kind of reject that. I'm like, no. This is like a very important thing that if you're going to spend your life creating something for the world, and that's going to be your interface, and you're going to take people's money and you're going to put that in people's homes, and you're going to like have this be like an entire lifetime of work. I think it's up to the individual to, sort of dive a little bit deeper and challenge themselves to be super honest about the thing that they are building. And I think like, again, like why something like Red Bull, why I love all of the like, spectacle and the gigantic sort of sham of marketing of, oh, we put this guy on the moon. The product's fucking amazing.
I think my hypothesis with Uber's maybe a little bit different is I love Uber. Like I'm an Uber user. Whenever I travel, we travel a lot.
That's
like,
the only ride share app on my phone.
Yeah, I mean,
you guys are asking if it's a real company or not. I'm like, I'm literally that's the only one I use.
Right, you use it. I use it too, and I love it. My hypothesis is that it's been subsidized so dramatically that at the price point that most people would use it, I don't think it exists. So and I think that we're going to have to see that over time, like the losses that have been funded into it. Yeah. I don't think the total economics will probably end up working for the business. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but I don't think it's like an obvious thing that it's worth billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Right. That's why I liked our conversations, because it's like, you're thinking about shit completely differently. Your timeline that you're operating is completely different. The things that you're going after is completely different. And that's just way more interesting. And it, I have a different feeling in my chest when I talk to you.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people have forgotten how to feel. Like that is a real thing. Like I know that the things that you're talking about are on this weird, like ethereal level, more substantive than something that I, get pitched a million times at a New York Manhattan bar or something, right? Like there's an inherent difference between how you're thinking about something, how you're approaching it, and the promise that you are making to your employees, investors, and customers that just feels different than a lot of the other shit that's happening out there. And I'm just way more interested in unpacking why does it feel like that? And then when you start to unpack that, you're like, oh, because there is a completely different framework for what you consider to be your objective reality. And our conversations don't really end with you being like, well, John, these dumb investors gave me all this money, so there's a market, go get it. It's like, That's not where your heart is.
Yeah.
And I that is like so much of where I think like the world is right now, where like you talk to a lot of these people, they secretly hate their product. They secretly don't believe that it's great.
Yeah.
They don't use it. They wouldn't give it to their mother. There's like this really weird emptiness to that.
It's like a hollowing out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Blaise Pascal called it incurvature. So it's like when you're curved in on yourself, and all you can think about is yourself, and you see the whole world, you as the central actor in the play. Yeah. And all you can think about is you in every context, and what do you get, which obviously creates a world of transaction, right? Yeah. Like that's the only possible conclusion. Yeah. And I do think that's something that early in my career, if I'm confessing, that's what my perspective was. And I think that's where over time, as my perspective has evolved, I've learned that the best possible thing I can do for me, ironically, maybe this is like a self-interest rightly understood type concept, right? Is be focused on the other, and how do I serve and care for the other?
Exactly.
And then that ultimately will come back to me in the best possible ways.
100%. You can hear these frameworks when you talk to someone, like very, very quickly. You can see it with how they make a decision. Why'd you go to college? Why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? Why'd you start your business? So much of the answers of why someone start their business in a lot of these venture-backed startup circles is like some very, very short-sighted, self-serving reason.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is the world working like that?
It's almost like a plague of cynicism is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's starting from the position of cynicism. So cynicism is reality. Like there are no good
Yes.
things, there are no beautiful things anymore.
Yes.
There are no true things.
Yes.
And so because there's nothing true and beautiful and meaningful left,
Yeah.
then of course, how can it not devolve into
Yeah.
pure self-interest? And really pure self-interest always devolves into power.
Exactly.
And so, it's like postmodernism
Yeah.
infecting capitalism.
Yeah, everything I'm saying isn't very novel, and people have been sort of chitter-chattering about this for a couple of years. But yeah, it's like we've kind of really fucked ourselves where we've really perpetuated this lie of, obsession with independence and obsession with individualism. And it's like, well, where did you get these ideas from? Like, where did that come from? Why is the thing that you're not optimizing for something bigger than yourself from day one? Like, no, you don't really hear people talk about like, well, I'm going to do that because my family.
Right.
Or like, you don't really hear of like, oh, I'm going to do that because I have this team of 20 employees that have been with me for 5 years, and like, I'm going to fucking kill for them. And like, we are going to do something incredible. And like, those are my guys. No one hears that. It's like, no. Shh. I gave them 0.05 that is going to get completely collapsed in our next funding round, but don't fucking tell anyone. It's like a very strange little subtle difference that like no one is really holding each other accountable for this whole new framework of what is real. What are you really, really willing to scream at the top of your lungs that you believe is true?
Well, I mean, I think that's very few people are actually telling the truth anymore because there's a high cost to truth. And it feels like almost there's mercenaries for independence or freedom. Like it's like freedom fighting mercenaries, right? Mm-hmm. It's like everyone's fighting for this idea of sort of absolute freedom, which maybe in Manhattan in a concrete jungle, you can pretend that. In Columbia, Missouri, like we've got trees and there's open land around here. So like we know humans didn't create that. We actually do know that there is something more beyond us. Yeah. But I think it is easy. I mean, when I go to Manhattan, I can feel my heart being pulled towards sort of this pinnacle of the universe being the will of man. Yeah. And I think that that's what it sounds like I'm hearing you say is that amongst the circles that is true. And that people are saying, okay, I'm going to fight to get my freedom, whatever that idea of freedom is. The whole point of freedom is to have the freedom to commit. Mm-hmm. Right, freedom is very powerful. It's healthy, but the freedom is only valuable. It's not valuable in and of itself. It's only valuable in the way you spend it. Yes. And the thing that people I think are searching for from freedom, they don't realize they actually get from a lack of freedom, from the commitments. Totally. And I think this is all kind of coming back to this collapse of meaning outside of the individual. Yeah. And if we all retreat into ourselves, if that incurvature happens and we all are just, hey, how are you getting your power? Mm-hmm. Here's how I'm getting my power. Mm-hmm. Here's how, what's your freedom? Here's my freedom. Mm-hmm. Well, great. Now we're both guys with freedom and power. Yeah. So what? Yeah, exactly. If you don't do it, and by the way, in 100 years, no one's going to know your name. Yeah. I don't like that one. I love it. No, let's debate that. Hold on. Let's go. I think no one's going to know your name in 100 years if you don't prioritize the right thing. My argument is by prioritizing the right thing, almost by definition, no one will know your name in 100 years. I think that this is a part of the thing where it's like what you do doesn't matter and what you do won't ever map to anything. So just fucking get yours. So I think that is an easy way to take that in that direction. Which I think most people do. Which here's the interesting part though. I think most people are terrified of that people won't know their name in 100 years and are terrified that there actually is like this soft nihilism. So the response actually I think people are having to it is less like, oh, well, whatever, live for ourselves, and more like this deep despair that creates this massive hole in the middle of their lives. But then they're trying to fill with doing these things that end up causing the things that we just talked about. But this is still going back to the idea of self-worship, where that only makes sense in the framework that you are yourself. That's correct. And only yourself. And I am not myself. Correct. I am my family. Correct. I am my bloodline. I am my great-grandfather, and I am my future great-grandchild. And I don't know where we decided that this type of thinking was bad. I talked to all these rich guys. They're like, I'm going to make all this money and my kids aren't getting shit. And I'm like, what the fuck? What's the point of that? I get your sentiment that you don't want to spoil your kids, but like, bro, you're playing on this 50-year timeline for the shareholders. It's pretty fucking lame. Like,
play on a 300-year timeline for your great-great-great-grandchildren.
Right.
This is why I think we got to bring back naming your company your last name. I'm just going to call my company Fio.
I love it.
It's just Fio Company, you know?
Well, it identifies when your identity is closely associated with it, the values. I mean, if Fio gets convicted of fraud,
Yeah.
like that reflects on you, right?
It's over.
That's your name. Actually, we bought a company last year from a guy who said, I said, hey, how do you, tell us how you want me to handle this company in the future. And he said, my son's name is on the door.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Like I want it to be successful.
That's sick.
And he meant it. He looked me in the eye and he was like, I want it way more than the money. We wrote him a big check.
Dude,
he was super happy.
Think about that sentence. What extrapolates out from that sentence? That changes literally your entire operation. That changes who you hire, what you incentivize them for, what their belief is, what the mission is, where they're going, why they're going there. That changes everything. That one sentence just changed literally the entire ripple of how an organism in operation is going to function. And that's what I am trying to get back to. Fio is not my last name. My last name is Fiorentino. Fio, I think, is funny because it actually means to become and to create, which I think is funny. I was like, and I think there's something in there about fire. So like fire, create. I was like, that's fucking sick. I was like, all right. But yeah, I mean, I'm very pumped about where we're at right now. I couldn't be more excited. The thing that I've been working for 10 years, I'm like on the fucking cliff. All I'm doing is before we all sort of jump back into the game where it feels like we're having this little bit of a reset, I just like talking about right now of like, wait, let's just get a few things. Let's tweak a few things about our like core understanding of how we're all going to agree on what's valuable before we dive back in. Because like you just said, like that guy that I bought from, he said, my kid's name is on the door. It changes everything. I think we need to have more conversations about sentences like that so that just a tiny piece in most people's hearts shift a little bit, and it's a little bit more further reaching. There's a little bit more conviction. There's a little bit more leap of faith. There's a little bit more belief in the idea that things are real. There is a truth. There is a good and bad, and there is something better than something else. And the better thing is to serve more people. And if we can go more towards that direction and less towards, well, if I get my bag, then fuck it. I think we're going to have a way better world.
I think that one of the things I keep hearing you say is, we are not independent actors devoid of all past and all future, right?
Biggest falsity.
It is the biggest falsity. And I think that a lot of this can be reflected in how we treat elders today.
100%.
If you look, like people don't respect elders. David and actually I have been talking about this. In my life, like where my learning really accelerated is when I sat at the feet of elders and I said, hey, you've been there, to teach me, help me learn. Like what can you help me with understanding that I probably wouldn't get to for decades.
Totally.
That's when I just started. It was amazing when I started seeing that happen. And I think that's where it's like we are the beneficiaries of an inheritance. Yeah. And inheritance is often seen as just a financial transaction. Inheritance means way more than that. Inheritance is about values. It's about traditions. Yeah. It's about ways of being, ways of thinking, right? And yes, there's a financial component of it that's really meant to unlock all the other things. Yes. We've, I think, bastardized inheritance as a concept that all we think of now, that guy who's like, well, I'm going to make this huge pile of money and I'm not giving my kids anything. Yeah. It's like, well, yeah, because I think what he was saying in that, I mean, inherently was if I give my kids this money, it's going to destroy them. Well, why would it destroy them? Yeah, because they're incapable of handling it, right? Now, wouldn't it be the ultimate dream to have an incredible inheritance financially, but an even greater inheritance non-financially?
Yes.
That then you could take the financial inheritance and put it into people's hands who could extend the vision for decades and decades and potentially centuries further. So that you almost like, this is what I meant by no one's going to know your name in 100 years is you are part of a through line. And I think this is where, when I think of it, it's a very comforting concept to me because no longer am I trying to stand on my, and say, hey, here I am. I'm Brent Beshore, worship me. I'm going to put my name on everything. I'm going to try to be known, right? Which I think is really damaging. Instead, I can say, okay, look, I come from an inheritance and I want to give an inheritance and I want to be a link in that chain. It's the most beautiful thing in the
Yes.
world.
It's like this crazy pressure that gets lifted from you, and you're like, oh, I'm just doing this for a way different reason.
So let's talk about the big thing that I first heard about you. My friend told me about you. He was like, this guy wants to create the next Disney.
Okay, wait, I'm going to cut you off.
Okay.
That's not true.
You don't want to create the next Disney?
No.
Okay.
Wants to create the next Pokemon.
Maybe, kind of. Okay, so it's kind of very similar to the storytelling meme. Like this, like everyone now is running around saying, I'm going to create the next Disney, or, Web3, like Disney on blockchain, or like Nintendo. Like, it's like, this is like, if you think about what, do I want to be the next Disney? Yes. In what way? In the same way that I want to be in the same stratosphere as all of the greats who have done something so incredibly true and real that their work is going to live on forever. That's why I want to be the next Disney. It's not because he has fucking Mickey Mouse or like makes stories or whatever. It's because, in my opinion, the most impressive thing about Disney is how he designed his business. And if you look at, everyone was making cartoons back then. Why did Mickey Mouse work the way that it did? It was because he designed his business in a completely new, insane, crazy way that was just playing 4D chess while everyone else was just making a cartoon.
Okay, so tell us about that. What was the 4D chess? What was everyone else doing, and what was Walt doing? And by the way, a Missouri boy, might I say?
Yes.
Do you feel the tingles of kind of
feel
being
it.
back in
I
his
feel it.
homeland?
Center of the known universe, Missouri.
He crushed. What he did was he sat on the edge of an emerging technology and built a brand and a team and an infrastructure that compounded on itself better than any other organism at the time. And he did that by positioning his business and his team around not a singular thing or a singular medium or a singular goal. It was this way, way, way crazier goal of, we're going to make the best art. We're going to make the newest art. We're going to monetize it in this way. We're going to sell it in this way. We're going to distribute it in this way. He had every piece of the business, basically under his thumb. And he knew that whatever input he had, the more pieces of his business that he had under his thumb, the more he was able to control that to put him into a position that gave him a crazy competitive advantage when he had a hit. And then when he had a hit, he had the infrastructure and the team and the flywheel to compound on that hit better than anyone else. So like, a regular studio has a hit. They go, whoa, cool, we had a hit. Okay, let's make another one. The way that Disney set up his business, when he had it hit, it bled into 70 other doors in his business that inflated it and made it more of a compounding infrastructure, right? So like, that is totally different than making cartoons.
It was world building. He truly built world.
He built this crazy 7-pronged monster that, depending on what side of the monster you're looking at, you think he's in a business that he is not in. I think one of my favorite little lines on Disney is that they make animated hit movies to be able to charge 7x on chicken fingers at their parks. Chicken fingers is one of those profitable line items on the Disney balance sheet. And yeah, when you think about it, that's what they're doing there. They're making, in order to be able to have the leverage to sell chicken fingers at a 7x, they now need to create the best art of all time. And the 7x chicken fingers don't matter if they don't make the best art of all time. And the best art of all time dies if they don't charge for 7x on chicken fingers.
I had a $15 turkey leg.
Legend.
There last week.
Legend.
So, I mean, I got to say, my expectations on the turkey leg were pretty low. I mean, it was amusement park turkey leg.
Exceed.
It was delightful.
Yeah.
Delightful.
Yeah. I think if you look at anyone, and this is why I like Red Bull, and it's these dudes that came at it from a completely different perspective. And it was never this thing of, we're in this business and we don't do that. They were true, experimenters, inventors, risk takers, creators. And it's like, I always hate when I call up a founder or a business person and I give them a fucking insane, awesome idea. And they're like, oh, we're not in that business. I'm like, yes, you are, because that idea is sick. And every time someone interacts with that sick idea, they're in your business. And McDonald's, right? Like, what do I remember about McDonald's? McDonald's got me by having those fucking playpens and the Happy Meals. What if they said they weren't in the daycare business? Or what if they said they weren't in the toy business, so throw the Happy Meal out? When I say I want to be the next Disney or these guys, it's like I just want to operate on this level of mastery that when you start to operate on it, they all look the same. Like Jordan looks the same as Bezos, looks the same as Disney, looks the same as Howard Hughes. They all sort of think similarly, they act similarly, they approach things similarly. So it's like, I'm just interested in tapping into that. And, I don't know, maybe I never get there. Maybe I do. But I'll tell you this, the next Disney is not going to look like Disney. I think, again, like all of this stuff, to me, then this is why I only try to do shit that's, in my opinion, going to last forever, right? And I know my products, I know like what I'm saying doesn't, for now, exactly match my products. But if you look at my products, astrology has been around forever. I made the best stuffed animal of all time. That's not going anywhere.
Got it, mine right here.
Yeah, David, by the way, David's a true believer. His son.
Moon Pals.
We're going to talk about Moon Pals here in a little second.
No one's ever going to not buy bean bags, and everyone's always going to want to sleep better at night. To me, the most interesting shit is just looking at time. And I want to choose the path that never ends. And I want to use my measuring stick as time. I was with this guy the other day who was like 85 years old, and he's on the phone doing like a $10 billion, hostile takeover. And I'm like, this is baller. 85, just like ripping it. And you could just tell, again, like to me, like no one knows this dude's name, but to me, like that felt like I was in the room with like Usher, It was like, oh shit, like this guy is doing it for a different reason. There's a different thing. There's an energy coming from this dude that is just completely alien to 95% of the world. And he is doing this just because this is what he does.
It's for the love of the game.
It's for the love of the game. And you can't fake that. To me, the way that I try to make every decision and how I try to spend every ounce of energy that I put into my life and my work is this thing going to be the thing that lasts the test of time? And if that's, my name, my bloodline, my products, my work, my ideas, my partner, like I don't want to spend my time on anything that is not real. And I think that realness is determined by the marathon. And it's like the line that never ends. And if you're on the line that never ends, you can feel that.
It's the infinite game.
Yeah.
Now, isn't that just another way, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, of justifying your self-existence? I made something that lasted, therefore I had value.
No. I think it has nothing to do with I made something that lasted, therefore I had value. It is, I think that there is an objective, true greatness and a true human potential. And I think that having a fulfilling life and a transcendent soul is real. And I think for me, that means being on this path forever and never giving up and always trying. And I think finding the thing that you are willing to submit to and serve, whether that's, your family, your work, or both, I think there is something more true and better about that than not doing that. And that is a completely different reason to do the thing than I'm going to do this so I can tell myself that I had value.
Yeah, it's almost like we become more human, not less human, by submitting to something else that is bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we become more us by not being the only thing that us is.
Yes. And I think to take it from the existential woo talk back to something a little tangible is that, make no mistake, when I start businesses and run businesses or try to make things happen without that framework of belief, they don't work. And I lose all my money. I waste time. I waste energy. I don't make money. That is not fun. So the existential woo framework that we keep kind of going back to, we keep going back to that for a very specific reason, because that, in my experience, is the only way to have something be created that works, that literally affects your bottom line and literally keeps your business alive. I'm obsessed with the truth, and I'm obsessed with finding that truth, because that is the only way that I'm going to make the most money. And I think that's when I get really interested in how you know something is true, is when you have that really funny paradox that we've talked about a few times, is where if you try to be the most selfish of all time, you end up at the idea of, I actually have to give it all to something bigger than myself, is actually the most selfish and selfless thing that you can do. And when you find those points of paradoxical resonance, that's the shit where I want to quadruple down on. And I think when we talk about, the through line of this stratospheric greatness that every human, in my opinion, is on the quest to touch and taste and be a part of, maybe that's, what someone would call being a billionaire, or reaching enlightenment, or, having a fulfilled life. All of that to me is very, very similar. And I think that tapping into those things not only makes you feel better and be a better person and makes you have a more true existence, it also grows your business.
Pursue truth above all things.
And how you define that's super real. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think I think it's very clear. I think if you really ask yourself, is this the honest to God truth? There is a voice inside of you that tells you yes or no. And pay attention to where that voice comes from. Pay attention to the tone of that voice. What part of your brain does that voice enter into that tells you, yes, this is true? And what part of your brain and what tone of voice does that voice come into where it says, yeah, no, it's not, but no one will know. No one will know. Just keep going. No one will know. Those are the things that I'm really, really interested in. And those are the things that I think are the most valuable places to explore to have the biggest impact on business.
I think that's what makes Moonpal so genius, right? I'm holding it in my hands here. So it's a weighted stuffed animal with big, long, heavy arms that can wrap around a kid, right? But it's not just the utility of wrapping around my 9-year-old when he's feeling anxious. Mm-hmm. It's the story behind it. It's the world you built around it. So that's the story. There's something watching over me from the moon. From the moon. So there's mystery to that. There's transcendence to that. But then there's also, I'm alone. I'm a kid, right? I'm alone. I'm sad. I'm scared. I don't know what's going on in a kid's life, right? But at nighttime, it could be a hard time. This moon pal is going to come down and is going to be physically weighted on me, present with me, wrap its arms around me, and help me feel better.
Yeah.
It's the story.
Yeah. I think it's really, really hard to find a kid and put a moon pal on the kid and have them not feel better than they did.
But you could be utilitarian about it and say, oh, well, how do I make a weighted blanket for kids? Oh, stuffed animal.
Totally.
But you went the next step and said, what's the deeper reality? Kids want comfort. Kids want to connect to someone watching over them.
And this is just, what you just said was two things. You just said you have a product that does this thing that I've seen work, and it has this story. The story right now is like a 20-page children's book that I wrote. Now, this is where it gets fun. Where does that end? How many things can I do?
Where's the cartoon?
Exactly. And that's only step 3. I think there's 150 steps.
Where can I get my chicken?
What?
I want my chicken. I want my 7X chicken.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, like, why, when we talk about Disney or we talk about Steve Jobs or we talk about these guys that have built these things, in my mind, it is a 7-prong organism that rapidly expands and gets better and deeper and more true. And it is a system that is built to churn that truth out. And the way that that organism is built is to continuously find and get close to that truth. And if they start to shy away from it, it goes really quick. And what's really, really impressive about Disney and Apple and these huge companies that are like lasting for a very long time that continue to be relevant is that they've built, you know, a truth machine that with every click of the crank gets a little bit deeper. And so, yeah, you know, I don't know. Maybe Moon Pals is the start of something that looks like, you know, maybe that's, maybe the Moon Pals takes me on a journey where I am, you know, selling soft drinks or cotton candy or something. Right?
Play that out. How do you go from this stuffed animal that's weighted to soft drinks?
I want, you know, if my team understands how to kind of take this idea of Moon Pals and paint it on 150 things and see what works, maybe the best thing is a new soft drink that becomes the next Red Bull or Coca-Cola or, you know, and that is the vehicle that transcends the mixture of that idea, that story, that world, that myth.
The hug for your tongue.
Hug for your tongue. Great tagline. Write it down.
Purifier. We just created something right there. Do we get royalties? Is that part of this? Is that part of this deal?
I just want to get into jeans. I want to get into his club jeans when I'm in New York.
Yeah,
that's
get
my
in the back
payment.
of the line.
Oh man, yeah. We'll definitely hit on the club you're starting in New York in all your free time. Maybe that's a good segue. So Moon Pals, this is the next thing that you've really put your heart into.
Oh yeah, I think
putting everything in behind.
I would say Moon Pals is the first and only thing I've ever put my entire heart into.
What's the difference? Like, how does that feel differently to you compared to Gravity Blanket?
Gravity Blanket was awesome and amazing, but it didn't really feel 100% mine. It felt like 90% mine. And it felt a little bit static. Like I didn't really know how to keep going with making Gravity Blanket better, which is why we, you know, sold the business. It was like I was kind of out of ideas. And I was broke. I needed the oxygen. I needed to survive. But, you know, that felt a little bit more like me going to work. Whereas I can honestly say I will never, ever in my entire life stop making and selling Moon Pals. Ever. Put it in my casket. If I go broke, the first thing I'm doing is standing on the side of the street, reading my goddamn Moon Pals children's book and charging $1 to hug my Moon Pal.
I saw on Twitter you have a life's like 10-foot tall Moon Pal.
Yeah, we got
you could wear
got
that.
a mascot. I'll just put that thing on. Like that's how real it is to me. And that feels like my energy and momentum is coming from a different place.
It almost feels like that you were willing to play finite games to find an infinite game that you wanted to play.
Yes. And I think, you know, if I could snap my fingers, I wish I was Steve Jobs that found that shit when he was like 18 years old. You know, like he always talks about how that was one of the best things that ever happened to him, that he found, you know, the idea of creating and designing technology. That was what he committed to at like 18. But I spend a ton of time talking to like, you know, hedge fund finance dudes that are in their 60s that just cashed out for hundreds of millions of dollars that are now like, well, now I want to do what I really care about. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I was like, what was the last 30 years? What do you mean what you really care about? And yeah, I mean, that's advice that I would give to anyone as quickly as possible, whether you're starting a company, whether you think it's, you know, to start a family, whether you think it's to, you know, sell lemonade on the side of the street, get to the place where you feel like, regardless of the outcome, you're going to do this forever for the reason and the only reason that you think it makes you live a more fulfilling life. If you're dishonest with yourself on what you're meant to do and what is making you feel alive, and you're trying to look at someone else and be like, holy shit, they're so alive when they do that, so I'm going to try to do that.
I think it's like a vision transplant. It's like impossible.
Yeah.
You can't take somebody else's vision. I mean, this is where all the copycats, you know, see a company idea and they're like, oh, I'm going to do the same thing, only better.
Yeah, it lasts for like a year.
It doesn't work. I mean, I don't know how many people have come and said, oh, I want to build the next permanent equity. And my response is great. They're like, well, can you teach me all the secrets? I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
And then they flame out. right?
Exactly.
Like literally it doesn't work, right? Because we figured out something that feels like us. Like this is who we are.
Exactly.
That's the truth.
It comes from, it's the truth, right? It comes from the core of who we are, and permanent equity is an expression of that.
Yeah.
And so if you try to go fake it, it's not going to work.
It doesn't work.
That's why you can't create the next Disney. You got to create the next thing that
Fio.
is right. Fio.
I gotta make the next me. Like I gotta put that into the world.
I just want to affirm something. The energy you bring into a space, into a conversation, into an idea, into giving someone a new way of thinking about things. Like I think human connection is about transference of each other's energy, right? So I just want to affirm like your energy is a light, man. And like
Thanks, bro.
even as a guy, I'm not starting a company. A lot of our listeners maybe aren't going to start a company. They work for a company. They're just being creatives in their daily work, whether they're creating a spreadsheet or creating marketing something, whatever. Your framing of what's true though. Are you having to convince someone that something's true, or is it true?
Or you convince yourself it's true.
That's probably where to go start.
I was going to say it's the easiest person to convince, I think, is yourself.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, I think many times in my life, like I think I've lived a bunch of lies that I didn't even know I was living.
Yeah.
Because I thought they were true.
Yeah.
And then turns out it's this lie.
Yeah.
And I'm as shocked as any. I mean, everyone, I think other people around me are like, yeah, bro, we've known that for a while. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
That's not good for you. Yeah. You shouldn't be doing that.
But you bring your energy in, and it makes me go, oh man, I'm super pumped to create stuff that taps into that truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just got to crank. I get it. We all have jobs. But like,
Totally.
it's, I don't know. I'm just affirming you, man. I'm not trying to like
Love it, bro. Appreciate it. Thank you.
bluff you here.
Thanks.
I'm not going there. Oh,
I feel like I've built my companies in a very strange way that when I talk to almost everyone, they don't end up with the structures that I have.
right.
Where I've actually never really hired for like a specific role. I find people that I kind of resonate with and clearly have an energy that wants to do something great in the world. It's again very clear that they have this sort of resonance with like, I want to work on something true. I'm sick of the bullshit. And like the second I get a few of those things, I'm like, amazing. What are you the best in the world at? And let's just do it. Like, let's just do that. Like, okay, cool. It's like, doing packaging. Amazing. You're now head of packaging. Go. Or like, a lot of people are just like, I really love doing everything. And like, I'm really good at everything. And I'm like, amazing. You're hired. Let's see. And like, we'll just dive into, and I again, like, that's like, there's this thing where it's like, if it's an idea, like I don't try to force the idea into the market. I don't try to take an employee and put them into my company. My company is a thing that is built from the employees. And everyone that I hire is unbelievable. I don't even think I'm like probably such a bad boss in so many ways because I don't even think I've spent the time to give them titles. I don't even know how to think about them other than like, they're just fucking killers. They're awesome. I can throw any problem at them. We solve all of the problems together. And like I just trust. I have this like crazy trust with everyone that I hire where like I just know that they're going to do the right thing. And I know that if they are questioning about what that is, they'll come to me. And I know if they fuck up, that they will be honest with me and themselves that it was a fuck up and we'll do better next time. And if you have that sort of approach to life or business or anything, like it's going to work.
I feel like you know, there's like a spectrum of you either have to optimize along the spectrum for creativity or for repeatability.
Mm-hmm.
This is where kind of like the tension between freedom and systems comes in. And it sounds like that you, and it's obvious why, being the business you're in, creating products, new ideas, visioning, all the stuff, you've heavily tilted towards creativity. And that's not surprising to me in how every organization's built. Typically, the owner, the founder is going to have a core skill set and they're going to build basically a team around that. Replicating the core of what they are is by far the most difficult. So like in my organization,
yes.
like the only thing I'm actually really valuable for anymore is the deal making side.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that I have most anxiety about replicating because I'm still the person on the staff that can do that the best. And really everything else, like I'm second or third best at.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't surprise me. And over time, as you scale organizations, like there's a need for repeatability and for systems to take place. And I think that actually your anxiety around hiring creatives is like well placed, because there's that tension that exists between, hey, we need to have predictability, and then we need to have this incredible creative outlier outcome. And those things just usually don't fit together. And I think actually Disney
did it perfectly.
Did it perfectly, but has struggled at times with
now.
the creative.
Let me just be very clear here. When I say Disney,
pre-1989.
Exactly.
I'm not talking about 2004 Disney.
Yeah. Every film that's come out in the past couple of years. What?
WALL-E, bro. WALL-E.
WALL-E's a masterpiece. But that was that was Pixar.
Yes, touche.
I don't even think that was was that post acquisition.
I don't remember.
I don't think so. I think that was pre.
Yeah.
WALL-E's good.
You want to talk about hiring masters though? Have you seen the cartoon, them doing the sound effects? Have you seen that on YouTube? They go to the sound effects studio for the original like Mickey Mouse cartoon. And you used the word art earlier. It is a perfect balance of art and engineering and creativity. And somehow Disney attracted those guys to come and kill it. Yeah. And they created that world for the kids watching the cartoon. Everyone.
Yeah. I went and hung out at Pixar for like a week a couple of years ago when I was starting this. And it was really crazy to be around. And you could tell what was coming that they had no idea how to prepare for. And you could tell what they were really good at. And I think the funny thing there was like they were kind of embarrassed because, I've been a lifelong fan of theirs forever. And so I'm asking all these, like, how'd you come up with this? Where's the story here? What do you guys double down on? Like, how'd you build that out? And, it was mostly creative in this. And I was like, we saw the Cars and I was like, yo, you guys fucking crushed with Cars. And the girl was like kind of like embarrassed. And she was like, I know, like, it's so cheesy. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, you guys made like a race car movie about, transcending the old timer past his, I was like, and you sold 20 billion in merch. I was like, it's fucking sick. And she was like, I know, like, I don't know. And she's like, yeah, but like, Inside Out was still cool. I was like, yeah, Inside Out, I cried. That's fine. But like, you didn't sell 20 billion in merch. And like, she was like embarrassed about that. I think what you're talking about of how do you mix this creative and, this systems thinker, how do you mix them together? Like, I think when I try to find people, I try to find the people that have both of those things inside of them. Like if I'm talking about like how some crazy statistical anomaly that I found and their ears don't perk up, just as if I'm talking about, how
A Tree of Life is the greatest movie ever made by humans.
And how I walked out of it.
or if I'm talking about how Sade is a 1,000-year artist and how the fuck did she make those songs that literally I can't tell if they were recorded yesterday or like 60 years ago. Like, how did she do that? If their ears aren't perking up on both of those things, I'm less interested in working with them. I want people that have the warlord and artist inside of them. And how do we build something that mixes those two together perfectly that lasts forever? That's what I'm trying to do with Fio.
A big thank you to John for coming to Columbia, spending some time with us. If you want to follow what John is building, check out the show notes for some links or just search Moon Pals would be a great place to start. Hey, so I have a call to action for you. Who is someone that you could send this podcast to? Shoot them a text, email. We like to pride ourselves on being a company that is partnering with people to build and do real things in the real world. And the way we do that is by buying companies and doing our best to steward them toward long-term growth. We know that permanent equity won't be the right fit for everybody, but we're the perfect fit for somebody. And maybe that somebody is you, a family member, or a friend. As always, you can head to permanentequity.com to learn more about who we are, what we do, how we do it, and we're always ready to connect. So thanks for listening. I now leave you with your moment of compliance zen. Have a great day.
This podcast is made available solely for educational purposes, and the information presented here does not constitute investment, legal, tax, or other professional advice, and should not be construed as an offering of advisory services or as a solicitation to buy, an offer to sell, or a recommendation of any securities or other financial instruments. The thoughts and opinions expressed by or through this podcast are those of the individual guests and speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Permanent Equity. The discussion on this podcast of any entity, product, or service does not imply an endorsement thereof, and the guests of this podcast may have a financial interest, whether through investment or otherwise, in any one or more of such entities, products, or services. This podcast is presented by Permanent Equity and may not be copied, reproduced, republished, or posted in any form without its express written consent.